Hello everyone. Today we will just talk about setting up a GitLab CI/CD pipeline, and I have not created any presentation. It will be live demo. I have a code which is written in Kotlin, and it uses Spring, not Spring Boot. It uses Spring with JPA. Excuse me, and it does save data into Postgres. Save, update, delete, whatever. So you have sort of a service, REST service, written in Kotlin, which has controller layer, business logic layer, and the database is Postgres, and it uses Gradle for build. So that's my project setup. Now what? And this project is in GitLab. So the project, when I write the code, and after writing the unit test, I push this code into GitLab. And then on the other side, I have a server of my own. So it's a VPS server, which has dedicated IP address. And on that server, I have deployed Kubernetes, Kubernetes cluster. So, and what I want to do is, so I will just write here. So this is my code and it's on my laptop, right? So it's on laptop and I push this code into GitLab. Now what I want is, when I push this code into GitLab, on this GitLab, I will trigger a GitLab CI/CD pipeline. And we will walk through this, how this GitLab CI/CD pipeline is set up, configured, and what all this GitLab CI/CD pipeline does. But at the end, I want this GitLab CI/CD pipeline to deploy on my server. So deploy on server. And this is a deploy on server. And this deployment is Kubernetes deployment, right? So K8s deployment. So this is what we will do. I will not cover all the concepts about GitLab CI/CD, the Kubernetes context. So in Kubernetes cluster, you can, in Kubernetes, you can have different context. Maybe you can use one context for testing, one context for UAT, and one context for production. Various, strategies. I will not go into that. I will keep it very simple. I will show you the, when I show you the code, I will show you my, because I will deploying on Kubernetes, so I'll create an image. So on my, on my code, I will show you GitLab CI pipeline, where I can configure a CI/CD. It is YAML pipeline, YAML file. I'll show you the Docker file, what Docker file does, and what GitLab CI/CD does. Docker. And in GitLab, so in this, I have configured various stages, and there are jobs associated to each stage. We'll walk over that. Then in GitLab, we'll see the pipeline running, and that will be the GitLab CI/CD pipeline. And then this will see the GitLab CI/CD pipeline, each stage of that. And we'll see at the end, there's a deploy step. It gets deployed on the server. We will not go into the server and see the deployment. For that, I might create a different video. So let us start. So I have this GitLab CI pipeline, GitLab CI YAML file. So here, there are a few things, right? So I have different stages. So first I have declared some variables above, and then I have different stages. First is build, second is test, publish, pre-deploy, and deploy. I think most of the stages are familiar to us. What is this pre-deploy? I will talk about it once we reach this stage. So what I do in job build is, and by the way, as I said, this is the Gradle. I use Gradle to build this. In job build steps, so there is a one job build, which uses, which is part of stage build, and it uses this image, Gradle JDK21. And I'll not go to the what are all the things possible in YAML and what the syntax. Uh, maybe maybe that also is part of different video. But here, this build process, focus on this build, which is part of this stage build. By the way, this stage build, because it uses Gradle and Gradle needs Java, so I have used this image Gradle JDK21. And in this, I am running one script. First thing I do in the script is I echo that building the project. And Gradle project you can build using Gradle WR or Gradle WVAR or Gradle WJAR. I am using Gradle WVAR because I will deploy it on Tomcat and things like this. Now, once it builds it, it will create a WAR file. So I want to save that WAR file. And I'll say this WAR file on GitLab you expire it in 2 days. The next stage is a stage. For that I have created job test. Same image I'm using. So in the script, I just run Gradle test. So that is all I do. So this is a command to run your test cases. Then I have the publish. For that I have created job publish. And in job publish, so I have created a var file. I have run the unit test, and I want to just publish my the output. Now, what are we publishing here, and what is the output? So here I want to publish. I am creating a Docker image of my application. Now, and that is being done in this job publish step, which is part of publish stage. And I use this Docker latest image, and there's a service Docker dind which I use. The script to create a Docker image is, if you know Docker, you would already know this Docker build minus -t tag commit. So these are GitLab out of the box. GitLab provides these variables. So you can create your build, image with these tags. Then a Docker login. I am logging into the GitLab container registry. So in GitLab container registry, I'm logging in, and this is the process to log in. And we will see the Docker image created in GitLab container registry also. Once I create the image, I push it to the GitLab container registry. Now the testers are run, the var is built, the Docker image is created and pushed to GitLab registry. Now the last step which I want to do is I want to deploy this, deploy my GitLab Docker image of my application in the Kubernetes cluster. So I want to create some sort of pod with my application Kubernetes cluster. Now, what happens is, before I put my image on Kubernetes cluster, I have to connect from GitLab CICD to my server. This is this is my server, correct? Which has Kubernetes. So how do I connect from GitLab CICD to my server? So if you want to connect to any Kubernetes server remotely, you need to create a kubeconfig file. So what is part of this? Part of this kubeconfig file? This is the file name kubeconfig, CONFIG. In this kubeconfig file, you create cluster. You would see that kubeconfig file in your under your home folder. Then in .kube, then you might have some file. Generally, that's where it gets created. But uh, for your application, you might be using kubeconfig file. Your kubeconfig file might be in different location also. And you can run kubectl command pointing to that kubeconfig in different location. So this is the general path where kubeconfig is file exists. Now let me validate whether the name. So in my local laptop, if I go to my home folder and I type ku and then kub, then what are the files there? There's a config, correct? So this is the, sorry, I put double C, CONFIG, correct? So, or I can say whether, so this is the file. Now what what are the contents of this file? In this file you can, and I'm not giving tutorial on kubeconfig contents, but at a very high level you can define the clusters. You can have one kubeconfig file having multiple clusters, and for each cluster you define what is the IP address to connect to, and to connect to that cluster, you need different certificates, TLS certificates, because it is over SSL. So you define those configurations, like various type of certificates which are needed. You define that in for that cluster, you define that in kubeconfig file. So same way, if I have to connect from CICD to my server, you need kubeconfig file. So the way I have configured kubeconfig file for this thing to work is, so let's go to my GitLab pipeline. So in GitLab pipeline for your project, so this is my project. For your project, you can go to settings, and then you will see, let me go here. So you will do settings, and then you'll see CICD. Click on CICD. Once you click on CICD, you will see variables. So expand these variables. You can add new variable here. So what I have done is I have added a kubeconfig variable, correct? So this is a kubeconfig variable. If I want, I can edit this. This is nothing but the content of that file, content of that kubeconfig file. Now this kubeconfig file uses some certificates. For each certificate, I have created different variable, and I refer this certificate inside this kubeconfig file with dollar sign, dollar kube client certificate, dollar like this I have referred. And we'll go over this, how this is used in the GitLab CIML also. But at the end, and this kubeconfig file needs to know the IP address and the port of the Kubernetes server, that I have configured it here. And I'm using that with in kubeconfig file. I'm using this as dollar k8s underscore server underscore IP underscore port. So at the end, this kubeconfig file has all the information which I need to connect to my server, remote server. Now let's go back to GitLab YAML file. So what I do in GitLab YAML file is, before I go to pre-deploy, there's something you want to, so we have created the variables. So you had already covered the variables, by the way. Now I have written script. In the script part of the pre-deploy job, I have refer the kubeconfig variable of the GitLab, whatever I have configured in the GitLab variable, CICD variable, whatever I showed you here. Correct? This kubeconfig, this one, sorry, this one, I am referring it here. And I'm saving it to a kubeconfig YAML file. So wherever the CI/CD pipeline is running on GitLab, the content of this kubeconfig variable gets saved into this YAML file. Then I just cat it just to see that it's not needed, but I was debugging, so I cat it. Then I should save the certificate, various type of I'm using Minikube as cluster. So Minikube certificates also, I access the variable. So this CICD variable of Minikube, this Minikube, I access it and save it here. So all the certificates which are part of kubeconfig file, I save into local file. Then in the artifacts of GitLab YAML file, I say these files which I've said, keep those, because I will be needing these in my next step. So this is pre-deploy, and after that deploy comes. So the deploy, first I deploy the kubectl command. This kubectl command deploys, this process deploys the kubectl command. Now this kubectl command needs the config, kubeconfig to connect to the remote server. And it also needs to know the image. So this is my image. So let's see. This is a place where GitLab saves the image of my app, right? So above we have done this step, right? Job publish, and we ran this docker build, docker login, docker push, right? This docker push has saved the image here in this, correct? So I give that image name because that's the image I want to deploy. Then what I do is I have this kube config. So in the kube config YAML, right? Actually, the similar thing I'm doing here. So I'm going the kube config variable and saving it to kube config YAML. I think it's done 2 times. It's done 2 times. It might not be needed here, but live with no, be with me. So this is a redundant step. So then what I do is I say export kubeconfig environment variable uh, to kubeconfig.yaml. Then I say kubectl get ports. Now what happens is once I have set this kubeconfig environment variable to this kubeconfig YAML file. Now this YAML file has all the information which is needed to connect to the server which I have deployed on my server, to Kubernetes server which I have deployed on my Ubuntu machine. Correct. So kubectl get ports will get the ports which are ports on the my Kubernetes server on my remote machine. And then I say apply prod.deployment. So in the prod folder, I have created a deployment YAML file. This is Kubernetes deployment YAML file. And I say whatever is this deployment YAML file, just deploy it. Correct. So this is the GitLab CI YAML content. Docker file is nothing. It's very simple, like at very high level, other than installing some packages. I just say copy the Gradle W command, build Gradle command, settings Gradle, build Gradle file, sorry, settings Gradle file, and this prod thing. And my the source has all my application code, which I am using in YAML file to, you know, be, test it and package it and things like this. And I copy the prod folder, which has a deployment YAML file for Kubernetes. So that's all it is. So now what we'll do is, let's make some small change. So these are some references which I use to help. So these are some comments which I will delete later. So make some small change and I will push this to my GitLab. So there is no change detected. So let's do one thing. Um, make some other small change. Okay, now it appears here. And I am using a paid version of AI Assistant from IntelliJ. So I can tell it to generate the commit message for me. And it does a very good job of generating this commit message. I say commit and push. So there are some to-do things I have written. So I'm just forcing it to, you know, commit and push. So it will do commit and push into GitLab. Now, once that is done, let's go to the GitLab and we'll go to the build and pipeline. And you will see this has started. So if I go to this particular job, this particular pipeline, I'm sorry, you will see these are steps which I have given it. GitLab YAML file, build, test, publish, pre-deploy, deploy. So let it get over. I'll pause this video and I will resume once these steps are over. So we'll go over each of these steps output and see this pipeline succeeding. So the pipeline has completed and all the steps are successful. So you can see it built the job, it tested the job, it created a var file, it ran the unit test, it published the job to Docker registry, and we'll see that here. It pre-deploy step also got executed, and the deploy step also got executed. So this has deployed on my remote Kubernetes server. Now let us see where is the this thing. Where was it? Sorry, I'm just I want to see that container registry. So it's in deploy. Sorry, it's in deploy, and you can see container registry, and you can see that this is a container registry which it created a container Docker image out of my job, and it published that image here, registered that image here, and you can see that it is latest version or whatever. Correct. So this is my Docker image. So that is about this high level CI/CD flow through GitLab. So thank you for watching. As and when I have more learnings to share, I'll create new videos. Thank you all.